live stream. This is something different for you guys. So YouTube started off with this live together, and Ben had reached out and wanted to discuss about the different styles of keeping aquariums because there's been a big hot debate on water changes, when to do them, how you should do them, if you should do them, all that jazz. And he keeps more of the bigger fish. I keep more of the smaller fish. I have kept some bigger fish, but not quite like he does. So I think us coming together and having this discussion should help clear up and bridge some gaps that may be confused with what's going on right now. So I want to welcome Ben Ochart here. And Ben, you want to tell him a little bit about yourself?
Well, sure. For those of you not familiar with my channel, I started keeping fish when I was about 6, and and that was a very, very, very long time ago. And I've gone, of course, like a lot of us, I've gone through different phases. I had a job where I had to travel a lot, so I sort of got away from fish. And then uh, in the raising up of my 4 kids, one of them expressed an interest in a tank. Then he went off to do things, and I ended up with the tank and back in the hobby. So I got back in with discus, and but then I came across African cichlids. Interestingly enough, it was a lot of the videos by John Hudson and KG Tropicals that got me interested in African cichlids. Back then, I think it was Jay Wilson and him and maybe Steve Poland. I mean, there were a couple. Some of these old timer the guys have been around on YouTube for a while, and so I got into the cichlids. I made all the mistakes that you can make. I had all the different lakes thrown into one tank. I had tanks that were too small. I did everything. I thought I was a fish keeper, and then I got really challenged by keeping fish that produce tremendous amounts of waste and require more space and things of that nature. So it's been quite a journey, and I decided to get on YouTube. Just threw a video up there. Some people responded uh, in a very kind manner and encouraged me to do more. A video that would get 100 views was like, oh my goodness, I was texting my family and stuff. 100 people watched my video, and,
Right.
and then it just sort of built momentum and a following, and now here I am, surrounded by a few thousand gallons of water,
Right.
and and really enjoying it. I started doing it towards the end of my career. I was working in a business consulting company for 33 years, and in the last 3 years of it, I think I got into YouTube just as a hobby, and it worked out just right because COVID hit, my retirement hit at the same time, and the channel was starting to pick up. We relocated from California to Tennessee. All my tanks were gone. I started from scratch again in Tennessee, and it continued. The YouTube channel continued, and so it's just been a real fun ride with a lot of great people.
Oh, this community is the best. You gotta love this community. And the fact that we can have this discussion is what it's really about, and why we're coming together on this discussion is to help strengthen the community on the understanding of different perspectives that just may not have been shared. There's a lot you can read in books, but there's so much that goes unwritten that only experience can give. And myself, many of you guys know me from my channel, which we're doing this on, but I keep more of these smaller fish and I keep them in a lot different manner than a lot of people would even dare to try. And what I do is I try to keep a connection with Mother Nature and teach that connection to Mother Nature to all you guys to give you guys a different perspective on how you can keep aquariums and different ways to do it. Because as Ben and I was talking earlier, about how this is more of a art and a style, and there is so many styles of doing it, and people can choose their own. And I've got to say, those fish behind you, Ben, are awful distracting. Those are some beautiful fish.
Thank you. I had one person ask me if it was a green screen one time.
Oh, really? I could kind of see that, all the colors that are popping off of them,
Yeah,
and everything. You got that red light on them, and you probably did that on purpose to pop those colors.
yeah. I
It's
have the front light it's going to actually start to tone down a little bit it has a ramp up, ramp down. We're getting near the ramp
oh,
down time, but the two backlights are on, and they have a little bit of red and a little bit of green in them. So yeah, you've got some nice nice things going on there.
Yeah, a lot of people don't think about the lights when they're displaying their tanks on how they can help pop out colors and just bring out different kind of views, really, just within the visual of the color of the light and stuff, which is pretty wild.
I love a full spectrum light. Some people don't like it because they're afraid of algae growth, but uh, I think nothing makes a fish pop like sunlight. And the
Yeah.
closest thing we have to that is a full spectrum light. Uh, and I think the key, of course, is whatever you have your light sitting on. Uh, I always make a point to make sure that's clean because you get a great light, and then you put it on a glass top that has a bunch of black algae on the bottom of it. So I'm pretty good about getting it underneath there and like really pick it up and stuff. It's amazing the buildup. You can get sheets of black algae, but
Oh man, you got a lot of organics in that tank that break down that are creating and feeding that black algae.
I get only on the inside top of the glasses where I get anything like black
So
algae.
from where it's popping up and sticking to. I
Yeah,
know some keepers will take those glass lids and they'll just put them in their Placo tank and job done.
yeah. I, I,
Yeah,
I've done that, and I have a little pleco nursery.
yeah, there you go.
A friend of mine was about to break down a tank and had no idea that he had about 30 pleco fry.
Oh, nice.
And he had to break it down. He was moving. So he calls me up like a 911 and goes, Ben, I've got about 30 pleco fry that came out of a piece of hollow wood that was in the back corner of the tank. I didn't even know they were in there. Can I bring them over in a bucket? And I said, yeah. And they've been living in this little 10-gallon. And I've been farming them out to the different tanks. And
Oh yeah,
really, really, really cute.
they're great for grazing and just keeping things cleaned up,
Yeah.
especially oil film off the front of the glass and stuff. I sprinkled them around my old fish room. And
The dark side of plecos is that they make 20-foot poops.
yeah, well, depending on what you keep, that and they eat eggs too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So, as far as the discussion within big fish keeping and nano keeping, so and the water change thing, do you have any straight questions for me already, or?
Well, your initial comment was very interesting to me. It's like we all are to a certain degree plugged into nature.
Yes,
If
definitely.
if we don't,
We
uh,
come from nature.
yeah, the fish are going to die if we're not plugged into nature to a certain degree.
Mhm.
The question is how plugged in. Your tanks certainly, from what I know about you and the videos I've seen, are you can almost make a transition from, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you could make a transition from a actual pond somewhere and take out a square and drop it in, and you've got something very similar.
Yeah,
Eh,
essentially, I'm keeping is fancy mud puddles in aquariums.
Fancy mud pot, I love that fancy mud pot.
Yeah.
My tanks are it's a little bit different. I can't use a mud substrate and with a sand cap because the fish would immediately expose the mud. They
Yeah,
would,
they're known to dig. They're known to dig.
and also they destroy plants. I did a video a while back called I think it's called the truth about live plants in an African cichlid tank, and I had these beautiful anubias. A very prominent and respected YouTuber had said that anubias would be good because they're bitter.
Yeah.
What I discovered is that cichlids are they're like Dory. You know, they take a bite and they spit it out. Right? Oh, that's bitter. Yuck. They look and then look. Oh, a plant.
Yeah, yeah. And they have thicker leaves too. I think that's why people recommend the Anubias because they can be harder for some to chew on.
Yeah. Well, cichlids shredded $100 worth of anubias, and that was the end of my cichlid experiment. So
If you were to want to go with plants in a cichlid tank, I would recommend to start off with a grow out tank first to grow those plants out, because there is a point to where you can get to a mass that they can't keep up with. I have seen some big cichlid tanks to where they had a lot of top floating plants. They had Nubius, Java fern here, but they would put rocks and driftwood around it to try to keep the fish at bay from getting to it. And then there are certain plants that, if they do pick at, that can bush up together. So if you do have a combination of, like, you almost create them to destroy it, and then you kind of play with the way that nature ends up setting it too.
I've even thought of because I have these very large. You can see over my shoulder here, these very large plants that were made by a company that unfortunately is no longer in business called Elite Cichlids, and I've even thought about creating this artificial. You have this almost like a cage made of the artificial plant, and then have inside of it real plants, so I could get the benefits of plants and again protect them from fish being able to get to them.
And this is something that you just brought up about the benefits of plants, and with this. And this is something that I really want to touch up on, because there's a lot of confusion on this. When it comes to keeping these natural environments, a lot of people put it on the plant that the plant's doing the work. What's really doing the work is the biologically sound water and the beneficial bacteria within the aquarium. So as long as you got that biologically sound water with that beneficial bacteria in there, you actually really don't even need the plants per se.
Well, and that's what we see in tanks like this one here. You've got
Exactly.
a nice substrate. I know that you and after talking with you earlier today, the deep substrate is helping, but I also have a very nutrient and life rich sump that has big sponges. I even have some Ciporax from Sarah in there. There's even a little bit of matrix. I get sent stuff all the time. I go, well, okay, I just dump it in there, and so you have this very rich uh, sump. So I probably could even remove the substrate from the deck if I wanted to. But again, cichlids. Part of the fun of having big cichlids is watching them dig
Oh yeah.
around. You know,
Oh yeah.
carry stuff and create a snowstorm on top of another fish. Right?
Yeah. 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 That's funny. But yes, definitely. So with that, I used to have, I don't know if you ever saw it, but I had this 180-gallon bow front. This is when I first started getting on YouTube. It was just, it had a huge sump on it, and it had a Nubius, just huge, covered the whole 180-gallon bow front. But I
Well,
ended up turning that sump into another planted tank. And it got to a point that a sump ended up just becoming another tank to me, because I could filter that water through that planted tank. And then whatever babies that would come up underneath the sump would live out in the sump. There'd be enough microorganisms in there to feed off and stuff. So I used it as a breeding and collecting collecting tray eventually.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a fellow on YouTube, half man, half cichlid is the name he uses.
Oh, I know him. He actually used to live near me. I've been to his house
Oh, very cool.
in
Small
Indianapolis.
world.
Just right, yeah, once again. He was right down the road from me.
That's
That's
funny.
me.
It's funny. The but he was running that. Remember, he had that big aquaponics.
Oh yeah.
It was like a
Oh yeah.
jungle right next
Nicholas-
to his tank, and so he's running the water through that and then back in, and then he had a I don't know like 150 gallon sump that he
Yeah, like
put together.
road over there, all the pothos and stuff. Yeah.
Very interesting setup.
Yeah, it was really
So yeah, I think the idea of nature. I mean, we're all trying to capture it in a way. I think that the cichlid keepers are probably more. They have probably more. Maybe they're a little more. They have more vanity. Maybe they want that floating in air. They don't want to see a single little particle, in the water. It,
yeah.
it,
The OCD, or I mean, I used to be like that. Oh, I used to be really OCD about my aquariums until I just started just letting Mother Nature help me out because I mean, after you collect so many tanks, you kind of it's hard to keep a bunch of tanks like that to where they're absolutely immaculate.
How many tanks do you have now, Lucas?
I really haven't counted. I'm about to put up a rack that has 30 some plus more tanks, and I think there's 100 some in here. And then the house has got quite a few too. So I don't, I count when the dealing's done.
You'll probably end up probably up north of 50 tanks.
You are?
No, you'll end up north of 50 tanks.
Oh, I'm already north of 50 tanks. I brought 50 tanks with me from the move from the old house that I just had laying around. That's how many tanks were just laying around.
Well, you're like a tank Superman. I've got
Aquarium.
nine tanks, and they keep me very busy. I can't even imagine.
And see, that's why I try to teach people with this, like, because I know how much management does go into aquariums.
Yeah.
And I have tried to keep a Oscar actually in a filterless situation one time.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I had a tub. They're younger Oscars, still about yay big. And I had them in a bigger tank. And it was when the 180 busted up. It sprung a leak, and I had to put them somewhere. So I had them in like a 50-gallon Rubbermaid tote and a hang on the back filter. And it did all right. It didn't have any issues with it. The only problem that I really had was the maintenance was impossible because the algae that would grow from that fish's waste would just be phenomenal. Like it was just so hard to keep up. The fish could not eat the algae fast enough, and the algae was just eating up all the nitrates and ammonia because plants love nitrates and ammonias. That's why I don't ever have to worry about testing for anything like nitrates or ammonia in my aquarium because they actually consume it naturally.
You might have been onto something. Like instead of an algae scrubber, you get an Oscar in a tub.
Yeah, yeah. Well, see, there. I like to call algae Mother Nature's great equalizer.
Yeah, I like algae. I leave. I do the front panels and the sides. Because they're to some degree I don't think prop is the right word, but they're shown a lot on video, right? So I keep the side, but I don't touch algae on the back. I love green algae. I love the look of green algae. The fact that it consumes ammonia, the fact that it releases oxygen. I mean, it's the plus points are enormous. I think I even have a couple of videos where I talk about algae's your friend. And I used to run algae scrubbers on my bigger tanks.
Oh yeah, algae scrubbers are great. I can talk about those too, especially in a planted aquarium because they'll cause that waving emotion for those plants and it keeps the detritus off of them.
Yeah.
It could grow some really nice healthy plants from
And
doing such.
when I'd clean them, I'd make like what you talked about earlier. I'd make a little algae ball and
Yeah.
I drop it into it with some plecos, and I would leave the algae scrubber open inside of the aquarium like every week during cleaning, and the fish would eat it to the point where I almost didn't have to service it.
Yeah.
They just loved it like a treat. So it was
Oh yeah.
very nutrient rich.
I grow guppy grass just for my barbs to eat all the time. They just mow it down like cow feed. But with algae, see, if it wasn't for algae, a lot of us would be killing fish. Algae is more of a indicator that hey, you've got a nutrient excess of something. This algae is feeding off of something, either too much ammonia, too much nitrate, and or organics breaking down into your aquarium and the fish food.
Yeah. I have
So,
a brand new planted tank. It's not, you wouldn't say it's new, and I can relatively new. But let me turn this around. It's right here in front of me, and I can just show it to you if I can. There we go. Okay, that's a relatively new planted tank, and it's going through the phases that you're talking about. It's got a little bit of blackbeard algae, got some green algae on it,
mhm.
and the blackbeard algae I'm controlling with some phosphate pads, some small water changes, reducing the amount of light, and and it's actually coming along okay. It's got some a little plecos in there, and I'm going to be adding a few autos, and eventually maybe even a Siamese algae eater. But yeah, I'm the sort of tweaking back and forth to get the algae.
Oh, it'll be a constant battle because that algae will try to grow regardless if you try to change your water, the this, that, or the other. So don't try to pinpoint your water. When you try to pinpoint your water, you bring human error into the equation. You're taking nature out. A lot of these fish can take a wide range of water parameters that isn't really discussed about because most of the info that we find they have the pinpoint parameters. So a lot of people try to strive for those parameters, which will cause more problems. So what you'll want to do is understand that that will always be a battle with that algae in that aquarium, especially if you have driftwood with rocks. Because what naturally happens if the driftwood breaks organics down through time, because it's wood, it breaks down, algae will feed off that as well, plus the fish food. And your light is a bit bright. You can probably tone that light down a little bit, which will help with the algae trying to grow as fast. And once you get enough plants in there, the plants will absorb those excess nutrients and will start off balancing the algae for you. So
Yeah, the plants like the
you
crypt.
will go
Oh, go ahead.
you will go through phases and stages of it trying to cycle into different um new experiences that you haven't been through yet. And you will see that algae will always try to be there. So a lot of these aquascape tanks that are just immaculate, and I know people who have kept them for a long period of time with just immaculate condition, but they're also religious about cleaning the canister lines, cleaning all the algae out, and trying to grow the plants to where they offset, and they're pumping heck of nutrients in these aquariums too because they're trying to grow these rare plants as fast as they can because they could usually help supply their hobby by doing so.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
I think overall, I'm winning the battle. The plants that are in the that are rooting in the substrate are looking really really good,
yeah,
and
they look healthy.
and I have the light set at 30%. You can imagine how bright it can actually be. That's
Yeah.
that's a 30% setting. It's one of those co-op lights. I do have some root tabs. I do use the Easy Green, some of the co-op products, and so it seems I think I'm winning the battle. This is my first legit planted tank, whereas before I would just put plants in and just sort of wait for them to die.
And how long has that been set up?
It's been set up for a couple months.
A couple months. Yeah, yeah. I would say you're doing really well as
Yeah,
far as the growth and the amount of algae that's not in there. I would say that you're doing really well. A lot of people tend to overlight their planted tanks, and that's why I mentioned that maybe dimming them down because um, these plants. I've seen plants literally grow on top of other plants where I could farm out three different plants by layering them together
wow.
because literally like crypts and vallisneria and stuff like that. They dang near grow in the dark.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, and again,
Unless
listening to folks like you, uh, MD over in the UK, some of the stuff Corey does. I mean, I keep pulling from one of the themes of my channel is always be learning, and so I've jumped into these new areas. Plants were not even on the they were never even on the radar for me because
no,
of the kind of fish I was keeping. Right, it was like
yeah,
plants.
yeah.
So now it's but I find it very exciting and kind of stimulating to start to kind of put a toe in these different areas. And like I was talking about earlier, that 60 gallon that I have laying around, I mean, maybe at some point consider, creating a little dirted
Mhm.
tank, and so it's always good to kind of mix it up a little bit in your head,
Yeah,
right?
that's the fun with it is playing with all the different things that you can do in this hobby. So I've had so many hobbies growing up. I got trophies for tons of different stuff. But there's only one hobby that has actually always kept me into it that I never got bored of. And it's this hobby because there is so much extension to it from Mother Nature and just the industry itself that there is it's hard to get bored with it. It's really hard to get bored with it. And I do want to mention something about plants and the low light that I mentioned. If you are doing like more of the colorful stems, like your harder Rotalias, Luigi's, and stuff like that, you do want to run those at higher lights because they are used to higher lights. So there are different types of plants and stuff.
Yeah, right now I've got an interesting. I've got some Crips. I got some, and I've got the Anubias, which you could probably grow in a closet. So
Yeah,
it,
you
it,
look
it
here, there's no light on those tanks. There's a Nubius growing up on those. It just gets an ambient light. It's huge Nubius.
yeah, yeah. I think Anubias was the Egyptian god of darkness or something.
Yeah,
It's where the
yeah,
word comes from.
yeah. True.
So
Yeah.
I think that there's there's no there's no there's no argument. There's no conflict. There's no um, our world is better than your world. It really is a matter of communicating and learning from each other, and I can take a lot of what you're saying, just like I can tune into a video by the saltwater guys, and just go, oh, that's an interesting way to think about oxygen, and maybe
Mm.
pull that idea over, and so we can all. And what I'm saying is that there's no reason for us to get into my way is right and your way is wrong. There's just two ways, and only if I see somebody who's doing something that I know, like, hey man, I've got five male Venusus in my 60-gallon. I go, well, you're going to end up with a battle royale, my friend, at
Yeah.
some point. So only then do I point something out, and it's from the viewpoint of, hey, maybe you should consider doing this a little differently. But certainly, I think we can learn more from each other, and it'll benefit everybody a lot more if we do more stuff like this. Like, okay, let's get together. Let's get a saltwater guy in here. Let's get let's get a breeder in here. Let's get a betta person in here. And we start interacting and having panels like this. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely agree. I think we need to talk and discuss things in the hobby because I will have to. I know you say there's two ways about it, but in my opinion, there's like a million ways to do it because there's so many variables within it. And I think that's what's great about all us fish keepers on YouTube and what we share is we can share a lot of those different ways. But you're right about the whether it's my way or the highway kind of scenario. I mean, everybody takes what they will with a grain of salt and will take it where they will. But hopefully and thankfully we can have discussions like this to kind of clear up confusion that may come from such.
Yeah, yeah, and realizing that there is something that we can all gain and pull from each other, and in the end, we end up going our own direction anyway. The kind of tank that appeals to us. We talked about that earlier. About each of us have our own blank canvas, and that we want to do our painting on. And some of us are going to be impression. Some of us are going to be abstract. Some are going to be modern. So
Yeah, exactly.
there's room for all of it.
There is, and that's the beautiful thing about it. That's the beautiful thing about it. And a lot of what I'm doing here, and I think a lot of what causes frictions with kind of the big cichlid keepers and just the big fish keepers is they know what they know, which makes it harder sometimes to look beyond what you don't know and find what you don't know. And that's what these discussions are great for as well. It's just whether you're open to it or not. And people get to choose that. That's choice. And I'm glad that we're able to do it. So,
Back when I was consulting in the business consulting, one of my favorite sayings was the only thing worse than not knowing is not knowing and thinking you know. because that's where you get
Yes.
into real big trouble. It's like I'd never want to
Mhm.
get onto an airplane with a pilot who thinks he or she knows when they don't.
Right. Because that would be about the time that karma does its thing.
Exactly, exactly. And I've also found that uh, you really have to stay with an open. You really have to have an open mind. You have to have a you. The second you think you know it all, that's that's the exact moment you start getting stupid real fast.
Oh
In
yeah.
my
Oh
mind.
yeah. Oh no, I completely agree.
Yeah. So it's so I love the open dialogue and being able to, and occasionally you'll get people. I get people that occasionally will say, "Hey, dude, that's wrong," or "You shouldn't do it that way," or uh, and that's okay too. It's if you
Yeah.
put yourself out on YouTube, you're you've got to be ready for anything.
Well, there's an old saying I like to say: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Very, very true.
And Vibes Aquatics, thank you so much for the $2 super chat. I really appreciate that. Thank you,
Hey, Vibes
Vibes.
in the house. Vibes is a
The panel.
big friend of my channel.
Awesome, awesome. And yeah, if you haven't checked out Ben Ochart's channel, go check him out. For those all coming in, and let's see what else can we discuss about the big cichlid world and nano fish, and
Well,
I guess the different.
I can show you something I kind of pulled from your world, and this is a. Let me turn the camera around. This is a 90-gallon aquarium, and it's gonna be slightly tilted here. Let me turn this light off. This is a 90 gallon, and it's a rimless tank. And what you have here is a variety of fish that include some geos, some you have some severums in there, some silver dollars, an electric blue acara, and so and part of the philosophy or theory on this tank was to go with the deep substrate with the idea that a deep sand substrate that I leave alone is going to serve as a home for beneficial bacteria. Now, I'd
Yeah,
love to get your take on what you think about that, because whenever I bring that up, and I picked it up from an old saltwater guy from many, many years ago, but when I bring it up, oh, well, you're going to get gas pockets, and those gas pockets are going to create toxic. Well, then I talk to other people, and they go, oh, gas pockets are that's an old wives' tale. It's nonsense, and whatever
yeah,
gets caught down there just bubbles up and gases off. And you can see there's about 3-4 inches of substrate, and you can see it's growing a lot of nutrients. So
yeah,
I'd love to get your take on this whole idea of a deep sand substrate. I never mess with it. The geos mess with it, of course, but I've never vacuumed this tank.
yeah. So that's a great subject to bring up is the vacuuming part. So with my substrates, I never even touch them. You're right with the beneficial bacteria growing in them, and what it does is it makes the system live. And same with salt water, is they want that live rock. They want all that good stuff in their aquariums to do what they do because there's a lot they do that we still don't understand in science. So I never vacuum my substrate. Matter of fact, here in my shrimp tank, you can see the air bubbles that you're talking about. See those? So those are a lot of different gases. This is a nice, healthy sand because it is holding that oxygen. And when you think about roots and plants, they need oxygen down towards their roots. So they'll grow better with it. So if you can provide that for them, all the better. So what it does is it just creates a nice live ecosystem for them.
And what do you think about
Let me
the
top off.
idea that that sand eventually is going to be housing anaerobic bacteria that will also help in getting what some call the full nitrogen cycle?
I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but all I know is that it works really great for me, and I've never had an issue with it. Now, I did have a big aquarium where it was a 240 gallon, and I would actually get big bubbles that would pop up out of it. And this tank is cloudy because these guys are always kicking stuff up into the substrate. But the bubbles would pop up, and they would smell like methane and or sulfur. And I never had a problem with it. I had discus in the aquarium and all kinds of other shit. Never had an issue with any of that gas that ever came up out of it. And I've even had substrate to where it turned black and everything. These guys are awful skittish when they're not hungry. But you can see where I've
Yeah.
got tubs, sand all over the place. Those are some cichlids for you. Those are the caudal punctatus. These haven't had a water change. These are just top off ever since I moved here like a year ago.
Boy, that's a real green one right there.
Yeah, and you can see how the caudal punctatus been breeding in there and everything.
Nice. Yeah. So there's
So
a way of looking at that sand and saying, well, gee, that's dirty. Another person looks at the same sand and goes, boy, that's healthy.
three X at once. So I've got stuff everywhere. But that beneficial bacteria and stuff actually end up becoming dirt after a while. If it's really waste, the plants and or algae will eat off that waste and then it's just gone. When you've got microorganisms, when you got nature in your aquariums, it eats all that waste up. So it's a lot of people will say, oh well, they're all just sitting in their own poop. Well, they're not sitting in their poop because all the microorganisms within the stuff take care of it. See all them babies? Got babies all over the place. No filter.
That's always a good sign.
Yeah.
So let me when you clean something like you mentioned canisters, and are you using canisters currently?
No, I don't have any filters. Actually, the only thing I've got going is this pump right here, and this is for my Dacacia similis. And this tank will be dirty like this because I have a video that I talk about it. They were actually in here, which this tank is nice and clear and clean now, which I don't do. I did one cleanup on it, and now it's just back to where it was. A lot of it usually comes to the glass, but I will leave this tank like this because it will help keep them from getting distracted by me, which will cause more breeding. There's actually a ton of babies that I got into this aquarium from these guys, and these guys are super rare, hard to breed fish. And you can't even buy these fish in the United States right now. Nobody
Wow.
has them, and it's they're gone. There's actually I can show you some of the babies in here. I'm sure there's some floating around, but what they do is they throw their eggs all through the substrate. Oh, yeah. See them all grouped up, so they don't even look like the parents. But they go through and eat off all the microorganisms as well. So if this was all clean and sterile, there is no way that any of these fish would survive. And those fish were actually in there with the parents for a long time. So they were community breeding because of the layout of this tank. And here, let me get
Yeah. I think the camera's having a hard time with movement.
where I'm at.
Yeah.
That's a problem with fish tanks and being live is Wi-Fi does not like to go through fish tanks.
No, no.
But eventually, after I get done building more, I will be able to give people more edited videos about this kind of stuff. But after what all's been going on, I actually wasn't even planning on making videos for like the next couple weeks because I was doing so much with building. But I feel like this topic really needed to be discussed just to clear the air on some things and just bridge the gap for sure.
The reason I asked about canisters is that I was curious about your idea on cleaning them. You you see the wide range of folks that will give them a thorough cleaning where they're like pristine, like brand new when they're done, and you get some folks that just give it a light rinse and leave gunk in it intentionally. I have an idea of where you would be on that spectrum, but I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are about that.
So the dirtier the canister filter, in my opinion, now it depends on how you do it, but you definitely want to at least leave some because if you don't, then you don't have all that biology to take care of that waste when those fish do waste. And then that's when you run into your ammonia and nitrate problems because you don't have that beneficial bacteria in there and you don't have that biologically sound water to help combat their waste. So if you leave some in that filter after you do give it a little rinse off, and the only reason why I would recommend a rinse off, it depends on your fish. So if you've got a fish like yours love to swim in that current and play with it and you want to keep that current strong, you're going to have to eventually clean out your canister filter. And granted, I don't use filters, it's just my style, but there's so many things you can do with filters and that filters can help with as well. So it's not like I'm anti-filter. It's just I do it differently.
You mentioned something before the stream to me that I, I found fascinating about how when a canister filter starts to go a little slower, it's actually delivering a very high quality water back
Yeah,
to the tank because it's spending a lot of time in that bacteria, in that gunk. I thought, well, wait a minute, it's almost like you're creating a slower flow, which means you could end up with an anaerobic type of situation going on in there. And I just thought that was very interesting because, of course, that's one of the reasons that people will trigger cleaning a canister is a reduced flow. But in again, these two worlds coming together,
yeah,
it's like, wait a minute, a slower flow is a little bit better because the water is spending time with that valuable gunk. And only until the water comes out dirty do we actually clean it. Instead, we're getting this really rich, this really treated in a positive way, nature's treated water coming out of the canister. Anyway, I just thought that was a really interesting
oh
angle
yeah.
that I've never thought of.
So if you think about it like an air filter, what happens is when the bacteria grows onto that foam sponge, it collects on there. So then it's harder for the water to push through. So the it creates smaller microns availability to get through your water. So the water clarity will just clear up really, really well if it's being squeezed and pushed through all of that. And the tank, a video I did about water changing and no water changing, I meant to talk more about that tank that was in the thumbnail. The tank that was in the thumbnail there was a tank from 2017 that I had had until 2021. It should actually still be running with the guy who bought my house. But it never once had a water change, and that water had been crystal clear. It had probably like a 200 guppies in it, and it was just barely trickling. And what I would do is a flu ball 207. Once in a while, it would just like barely be coming out, and then I would just let it. I'd hit that pump, that handle thing, and siphon it out, pump it. That way, it spit out some of the gunk that was kind of clogging it up. And then the guppies would just love that. They would eat all over it. If you look out into the wild in the gut biome of a lot of fish, detritus and that mulm actually makes up a lot of their gut biome. So they love to eat that kind of stuff. So if you're not home, you like to go on to places on weekends and stuff, having a more natural aquarium so your fish can nibble on stuff. makes it able to where you can get away with going away. Like I can leave this fish room for a week and not even have to, probably even longer. I've never done it for a week. I don't really feel comfortable doing it for more than a week, but I've come back after a week and my tanks actually look nice and cleaner and healthier because they have reverted back instead of eating that steak all the time to go eat their vegetables and whatnot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, telling you, there's a lot of different ways to use a term that my wife hates, but a lot of ways to skin the cat.
Yeah.
The I would again, some of the things you're saying, I would never think, but yet they work. So again, coming together and like, okay, try
Well,
this, try that, and we all sort of find we find our comfort zone, right?
right.
So I like it. I like it a lot. The Do you want to take up some of the? I know we've been getting a steady stream of comments. Would you like to take up some questions? What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of this has to do with the hobby too. Before I jump into the comments, is there's not a whole lot of people who have done it like this to be able to experience these experiences to share with the hobby yet. So by you coming on here helps express that kind of stuff out of me because on my channel I can talk and talk all I want, but with YouTube's recommendation systems, I can only go so far. And by
Yeah,
having the interest of this topic and also people within the other side of the hobby where it's big fish keeping and stuff like that, or just people in between who are trying to learn, it's great that we can do this.
it is, and it's funny how the algorithm works because I've been subscribed to you for quite some time. I think we even ran across each other, maybe in an aquashella,
Yeah, yeah, I
and,
remember.
I subbed, and but yet your stuff doesn't really come up on my
Yeah.
recommendations. I'm like, well, why is this? Wait a minute, because I went to your channel after
Well,
John mentioned you in the live stream, and I'm saying, well, whoa, what happened? I went over there. I found you. I go, wait a minute, I'm subbed to this guy. How
yeah.
come how come I didn't get a notification? So at any rate, it's yeah, the algorithm. So maybe we're going to disrupt the algorithm a little bit, and
Let's
that
hope
itself
so.
is going to pull up some different feeds. But
That's what I try to do as much as I can, even though it tries to fight me all the time.
yeah,
The systems, for some reason, never really. I don't know. They always like to give me trouble, but you're not the only one who has had those issues. A lot of people have had.
yeah, I don't know. The algorithm is one of the great mysteries of the world.
Yeah, for sure. And I watch so many videos on SEO and algorithm stuff. It's crazy. Especially after my like ratio on my videos, I look at all the math, I look at all the analytics, and it just doesn't make sense.
So
But right now, I think it's either you're in the attention or you're not until you're pulled into it.
so I'm gonna let's have a friendly a friendly debate.
Okay.
I want you I want you to convince me. I'm just a guy I'm just a guy at Aquashella that's come across you, and I haven't set up a tank yet, and I want you to tell me why I should set up a tank like the kind of tanks you like, and then let's turn it around and let me sell to you the idea of keeping big monsters. And then,
So there's consultant coming out of you.
so
So
why would I want to keep a tank like LRB?
So why would you want to keep a more natural aquarium? Well, if you're busy, you don't want to have to deal with all the water changes and have to stress about pinpointing parameters and just really enjoying the hobby and having something peaceful and just bringing in a slice of Mother Nature into your house. This would be a good way to do it. Blah, 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 in a nutshell. Keep it short, keep it simple, And how about you?
So letting you're telling me that the things that instead of having to, I imagine there's a ramp up to that point.
There is a ramp
It's not.
up to, like, if they have follow-up questions, or like you can set it up with just sand, you can go into the whole how you set it up. There's many ways you can take that conversation.
And eventually end up at a point where I'll be able to be more less work and more enjoyment.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, that's a strong case. That's
Yeah.
a strong case. The In my case, what I like is the 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 heftiness and the interaction of the fish. I'll show you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There is small fish that'll do that too. I have killifish that'll come in my hand. You can pet them like little dogs.
Yeah, yeah. There's you can get them in different, of course, in different sizes. I like the interaction. I like the the big eye looking at me,
Yeah,
and I
they're
like
like dogs, like water
they're
puppy.
like puppies. I like when they latch onto my finger, assuming they don't have teeth,
Uh,
and so there's something about sitting in front of a big scape with big fish that you kind of feel like you. I love to snorkel, but I can't snorkel enough. So it's like I kind of immerse myself and lose myself in it. Now, I imagine you can do the same thing in a large planted situation as well, but I love the interaction. Now, that being said, because of the waste production, there is a lot of work. Because of the aggression, a lot of people abandon cichlids because they get tired of coming down to their tank and finding a fish torn to shreds. That's probably the case. I hear why more people have abandoned cichlids. It takes a while to get the right combination together. But once you get a group that gets along relatively well, it's kind of a cool thing.
yeah. And it's a different way
As
to
you,
keep too. And like you say, you like to look at the big picture of it. With me, I like to look in a tank and find the things that pop out of like the woodwork, kind of like
yeah,
finding where.
yeah, and I've been changing. I've been changing in the last 6 months to a year, where I'll sit and just love the way that snail is moving.
Yeah, yeah. Some
It,
of them
it's kind
snails.
of funny, like the way a pagoda snail pulls themselves along, right?
Yeah,
And the way the I have a whiptail catfish, the way he will match himself up to the wood so that you'd never have a clue he was there.
yeah.
He's like one with the wood, right?
Right.
And so yeah, I get it too. The enjoyment at that micro level, right? That nano level.
Yeah.
Very very cool. Very very cool. Well, man, it's been it's a learning. My channel is all about always be learning, and I think you've got that going on too.
That's good. That's the way it should be. That's the way it should be. We're almost at an hour here, so I want to address some of these super chats because they were gracious enough to support the channel, which I really, really appreciate and would hate not to address
Very
those.
cool.
Vibe Aquatics, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Appreciate you. Says thanks, Ben, for introducing that deep substrate. I did it on my frontosis tank setup. Heart and thumbs up. And Julian is Aquascaped. Thank you so much for becoming a member. Really appreciate that. Let me scroll here with my fast finger. I thought I saw. Yeah, here's a big one. $20 super chat. 3G. Thank you so much for that huge super chat. You guys rock. Well, you rock for awesome support and just being you. Thank you so much. And questions, I'm at the bottom of the chat. So if you got a question, we've got like maybe 5 minutes before we wrap this up. That sound good to you, Ben?
Perfect. Yeah. Does YouTube? Does this platform cut you off in an hour?
I don't know. I just usually try to keep it at an hour. There's
Okay,
not many
that's
people
fine.
who want to watch a video that's longer than an hour. I mean, some people podcast and things. There's a taste and flavor for everybody, for everything, and that's what's great is that we can offer these different tastes and varieties for these people. Somebody asked how many tanks I have. I really don't know. It's definitely will be over 100 after I get these next 3 racks done. But the thing is, I could set up 100 some tanks, but still have the motivation to set up 100 more due to what I know. And that's not for everybody. Actually, I did a poll on my channel where majority of people actually keep between 10 and 2 tanks.
That's about where I'm at.
And very seldom does anybody ever keep one tank. And I think a lot of that is due to the demand of maintenance. So if we can help with that.
The we have. I mean, I'm in a position. I mean, you're in a position where it's. If I understand it correctly, you're doing this pretty much full time. I'm in a position where I'm retired pretty much, so I'm able to do it full time. I can't imagine if my kids were younger and I had a full time job keeping a large number of tanks. That would be almost that would. I don't even know how I'd do it. I mean, something has to give always somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. There's only so much time in a day.
That's right.
And that thing is I don't have to I can use my time to enjoy the things that I like. So I don't actually spend a lot of time with my tanks. The most time I spend with my tank, I actually have been spending probably as much time, if not more, moving fish around to breed them than I have to actually maintain them.
Might be a good subject for one of your videos.
Oh, I've got a
You
whole list
want
of
to
subjects.
you have a busy life, big family, but you want an aquarium. Here's the
Yeah,
kind of aquarium you need.
yeah,
That would be that would have appealed to me in my when I first started, ramping up to where I am now. That would have been an interesting entry level approach to because again kids were still at home. It would have been a really interesting way to go. There was one question here. Do you mind if I address a question?
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Agua Bonita, which is beautiful water.
Yes, yes.
The main reason I don't keep big fish is that I can't provide a large enough tank for them to behave naturally. It's really more about what's achievable. I would keep bigger fish if I could, and that sort of speaks to your point earlier, Lucas. That yeah, you've got to have the space, the footprint, the floor strength to hold the weight. You've got to have the. I mean, in my case, I'm right in front of me here. I've got a hospital tank and it's 55 gallons. That's as big a tank as some people have as their show tank. For me,
Mm.
it's a hospital tank because of the size of the fish. So it's a whole different landscape, a whole different way of doing things when you're keeping the bigger guys, and a lot of factors. Like I was saying, and you know all about this: the ability of the floor to support things, the stands, the
Yeah.
filtration, the electrical requirements. I had to have this garage completely rewired, so I wouldn't blow fuses all the time, right when the heaters kicked in. And so, anyway, um, yeah,
Renters have a big issue with getting big enough tanks in their spots and stuff.
yeah.
Because I
So
know a lot of
I
landlords won't let you have, if they will even let you have a tank, some will only let you have a certain amount and all that kind of stuff.
yeah.
It's harder to house the bigger fish. But we do love them big aquariums. I tell you what, if you do start an aquarium, if you can, always I recommend going as big as you can because you always wish you went big from the start. But if you don't, hey, you're not missing out on anything because you're just going to end up with another tank. So it all works. Win win.
And the bigger tanks I have found, and you tell me what you think about this, Lucas. I found the bigger tanks to be a little bit more forgiving. I mean,
Oh,
we
definitely.
both talk about dilution and pollution, right? You can
Hmm.
make a little mistake on a 300 gallon, and it's not going to devastate you.
Yeah,
You make a mistake on your 5 gallon, you might have a big problem.
exactly, exactly. That water volume makes a big difference when it comes to the dilution and
Yeah,
whatever painting for sure.
yeah,
It's easier, a lot easier to keep the bigger tanks.
yeah, yeah. I think so. Much more forgiving and and of course, as they mature and become more stable, and you start to develop the attitude of mess with them less, it all gets better and better.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and
again, in there. when I first got on YouTube, I felt like I had to always be doing things for content, and I lost count how many times I got myself into a mess.
Yes, that will happen a lot. I've learned not to do that with YouTube anymore and just kind of step away. I try to give videos out way
Exactly.
in, and being in construction mode into all the woodworking and stuff, it's harder for me to make videos. And why I want to share this information, because I can't make all the videos you're talking about, or well, we were talking about there's only so much time in a day. I have a stack of just YouTube title notes that I've got sticky papers everywhere, and I just pile them up. I've probably got at least 100 titles of videos that I could come out with, but it's just having the time to do so. And since I can't do that so much, I would at least like to have the information out there stirring around so people are thinking about it, because I can't do it all myself as my channel. Obviously, you know.
Yeah,
So it's once again great that we can do this.
yeah. Well, anytime you'd like to have me back, I'd love to be back, and I'm really happy to see that your viewers are actually enjoying this discussion.
Oh, I think the whole hobby will enjoy this discussion because it's hitting a lot of points that haven't quite been addressed and whatnot. And Lady Diane, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. I did see that. I appreciate you, and always great to see you in here. But all right,
Yeah,
I think we are at the hour mark. I wish we could do this longer, but I've got paint to roll. I'm sure Ben's got things to do. And once again, like I said, most people don't want to watch like 2 hour videos and whatnot. So we'll leave it at
yeah.
this. Hopefully, maybe we'll
I
do it
kind
again.
of I kind of feel the honey-do list from the kitchen upstairs. I can think my wife is walking around the. So I got. We do have to end off.
Well, all right. Well, I appreciate you having the graciousness to join me to have this discussion, to get this kind of information out here. And if you ever want to hang out and talk again, or well, you got my number, you can always hit me up. And
Are you going to
glad
be at
to,
Aquashella in Daytona? You going to be there?
I will be in Daytona. Yes, I will
Good.
be in.
I'll see you there for sure.
Awesome. Sounds great. And thank you all for joining us for this live stream. I hope you guys appreciate it. If you did, hit that like button. And if you haven't seen Ben's channel, definitely go check him out. And until next time, everybody, peace. Have a great one.